All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. How are things, Martyn?
Well, fine, Jake. Absolutely fine, and great to be with you again, and great to be able to look back on Las Vegas and look ahead to this weekend when the NRL opens. Of course, we've got another round of Super League, and we've got Halifax coming back into the Championship as well. So there's quite a bit to talk about there, mate. Some very positive things. Also, one or two negatives, which are mainly the number of injuries that English clubs seem to be suffering at the moment, and we ought to talk about that a little bit later as well. So I think we're going to be in for the reasonably long haul, Jake. What do you think?
Oh, mate, yeah, we always manage to go overtime. Yeah, if we get 40 minutes to 50 minutes, that's usually the sweet spot, but somehow we end
It
up in
is.
that hour mark on a regular
Yeah, yeah,
basis. But
yeah. We don't want
that's
to,
all
we
right,
don't
mate.
want people to think we're talking too long. No,
That's
absolutely
right.
not.
Well, mate, why don't we start off with this week's Readers' Poll? I'm not sure if you've had a chance to take a look at it, mate, but with the NRL looking to take their competition to other major venues next year, which of the following venues would you most like to see hosting an NRL opening round set of fixtures? The options are Dubai, Hong Kong, London, Miami, or Tokyo. What would your pick be, mate?
Well, I think London's probably winning, but I think I would tend to go for Hong Kong. Um, I think Hong Kong is a potentially great venue. It's a great halfway house actually between the northern and southern hemisphere competitions. So and I think there's a lot of expatriate interest potentially in Hong Kong. It's in the Chinese market now, of course, which is very important, and regardless of political differences and so on. So, I think Hong Kong is a potential venue that I would like. I mean, the others that were picked in this poll were Dubai, London, Miami, and Tokyo. Obviously, London's coming out on top, as most people voting in it are probably British Rugby League fans. But the others, who knows? Peter Vlandis has got ambitions to take rugby league all over the world. Dubai, of course, is where the money is. So we'll just have to, wait and see on that one. Because if the Middle East got behind rugby league, then there's potentially pots of gold there that the game might want to draw upon. So who knows? It's an interesting thing, isn't it? It really is. I'm really intrigued to know what will come of it, to be honest.
Mm. And you spent a little bit of time working in Hong Kong when you were younger, is that right, Martin?
No, no, that was I spent a bit of time in Malaysia, but not in Hong Kong.
Malaysia.
No, no,
Okay.
I've only ever been to Hong Kong once actually, which is so I'm not going to claim any expertise, mate. Eamon McManus, the chairman of St Helens, he spent about 20 years working in Hong Kong in the financial world and was a real whiz kid at the time. He also captained the Hong Kong Sevens rugby union team as well. So we'll get him back because I know he's very keen to play some games in Hong Kong.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. He might be able to help Peter V'landys make that decision.
Mm.
Now, mate, we will jump straight into your column this week. You've spoken about Hull KR and why they fell so hard at Vegas, mate. It's been a bit of a what do you say, a penthouse to the outhouse situation for Hull KR for hence.
Well, I think I started by saying, rugby league is the cruelest game. And it is in the sense that you can be riding on top of the world 1 minute and then you can be riding, bumping along right at the bottom just over a week later. And it was perfectly illustrated. You're only as good as your last game. And a week ago, Hull KR's last game was the World Club Challenge, which was an incredible triumph. Now, their last game is a 58-6 defeat by Leeds in Las Vegas, and Hull KR are officially at the bottom of Super League with no points from 2 games. So, I mean, obviously, I thought they might struggle in Las Vegas because of the ridiculous timescale and so on between winning the World Club Challenge and going over there. But I didn't think they'd struggle quite as much as they did. And I think you've got to say that you have to say that Leeds played extremely well. Leeds obviously looked really up for it, to say the very least. And of course, they had the star man, who is that guy, Mike Acevo, 4 tries. I mean, who saw that one coming? Well, maybe Mike himself did. Who knows? But it was a fantastic performance by him and by the team as a whole. Ryan Hall on the other wing, he scored his 350th career try. It was an absolute triumph for Leeds, and a very miserable experience for Hull KR and their legion of fans who made the trip to the game. It was great to see so many of them there, and it was great to see Andy Bell, the Erasure singer, that singing his famous song before the game started. Earlier in the week, singing at Fremont Street as well. But unfortunately, it just didn't work for them in terms of the performance and the result. And my column says, well, it's not surprising. You can't you if you contrast Hull KR in 1926 with Penrith in 1925, 2025. Penrith refused to play the World Club Challenge game last year against Wigan because it would have only left them just over a week before playing at Las Vegas, and they realised it was too big a burden. And Hull KR went ahead and did it, and I'm delighted that they did. And Hull KR, did organise the World Club Challenge. They did it absolutely brilliantly, and they won it marvellously. But it just took too much out of them, mate. It took too much out of them. Emotionally, physically, it drained them in every sense imaginable, and you could see that from their performance in Las Vegas. They were okay for about 10 minutes, but then it fell apart for them as Leeds started scoring points. And you just can't play such a big game like the World Club Challenge, and make such a massive investment emotionally and physically into that game, and then raise your game again just a few days later. Especially when you're doing that on a very different, in a very different time zone. Don't forget, they were kicking off at midnight our time. A time when most of them would presumably be fast asleep in bed. So, and they only had a very limited amount of time to adjust to the jet lag. So, it was a heroic thing to do by Hull KR. And you might say, well, Leeds also had to adjust to the time zone. Of course, that's true. And Leeds played a game the week before, which of course is true. They did against York, but it wasn't anything like the same emotional investment as it was playing the World Club Challenge. So I don't think. I think Hull KR hopefully will recover from that. They play Huddersfield on Sunday. We'll have to see how they perform there. But obviously a massive disappointment, but still a great weekend away in Las Vegas for all the for all the fans who went.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the two Super League games we've seen played over in Vegas seem to have brought the most points. Obviously, Wigan had that massive win over Warrington. Yeah, and to your point, to back up from the World Club Challenge at home would have been a massive task for Hull KR, let alone travelling to the desert, Las Vegas, and trying not to be distracted by all the bright lights and the casinos, and that's a mission and a half, mate. And
you can't not be distracted, can you? You can't not be distracted.
Right. That's right. But we do have to give Leeds credit. As bad as Hull KR were, Leeds were just as incredible.
Fabulous.
From the opposite end as well. And I tell you what, if they can keep that form up, mate, for the rest of the year, they're going to be a real force come the end of the season.
I tell you what, it was, one of the great things was to see Brad Arthur looking so happy and smiling. Brad isn't a bloke who necessarily smiles, too easily. It takes quite a bit to make him look cheerful, but he looked absolutely ecstatic, and it was great to see. It was great to see, and you're right. If they can keep up that level of performance, I think they're going to have a great season. And it's funny, they lost their opening game at Leeds, and everybody thought, "Oh, crikey!" But they were a weakened side that day, and they brought players back to play York, and they had a strong team against Solskjaer at the weekend, and they were brilliant. They scored some magical tries, and that incident you probably recall where Sivo caught the ball from a dropout from under Leeds' own posts and charged upfield. Eventually got tackled, but then the ball was spread out to Ryan Hall on the other wing for an absolutely superb try. That was just magical. Anybody who watched that would be absolutely thrilled to bits.
And God, Sivo looks fit, doesn't he? Like he's just. Sometimes you forget when you look at him how big he is. I don't know if they could get him a bigger jersey, perhaps, but his arms are like that. I'd hate to try and tackle him.
He's a hell of a physical human being, isn't he? Really, absolutely fabulous. And I just hope, for his sake and for the sake of all the Leeds fans and every fan in the game, actually, because he's such a great entertainer, I just hope that he manages to avoid any injuries this year, because he's shown us now his incredible ability. And I think, we're all going to be licking our lips to see whether he can do that. I don't think he'll score 4 tries every week, but he'll certainly score quite a few on a regular basis. So we're all looking forward to seeing him doing that. Unless, of course, he's playing against your team. That's it's going to be a headache. Whoever plays on the right wing for the opponents of Leeds this year, they're going to have to think really carefully about how to stop Sivo, because the way that for one of his tries, he just palmed off Tom Davis and pushed him about 5 yards back over the line and touched down. I mean, he's immensely strong, so that's going to be problematic for anybody who faces him, isn't it?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't like to be a young player making their debut on the right wing against a Leeds side, that's for sure.
No,
Um,
no.
Now, mate, Vegas as a whole, what did you make of it this year? Obviously,
I
this is the
thought it was
third year
fantastic.
now.
I thought it was fantastic. I thought all 3 games had such a lot to offer, as rugby league games. But within that setting, I think what I mean, there were 45,709, was it? I think the official attendance. What it demonstrates once again is that when rugby league is on the biggest possible stage, it looks a great sport, doesn't it? It looks tremendous. It really is a fantastic product, as they say, and it should be an incredibly valuable product, and that's what we've got to focus as a sport on doing, and uh, making sure that the income that the sport generates befits its status. Really, it looked fabulous, and it was a brilliant setting. I thought the pitch markings and everything were absolutely superb. It just made it look important. And I'll tell you one thing, which I quite liked, Jake. I'd welcome your views on this. What did you think of the yellow posts? I thought the yellow posts looked terrific, actually.
Yeah, mate,
Looked,
they've
looked very distinctive, and something we ought to think very carefully about. Should
yeah,
rugby
I
league have
like
yellow
them.
posts everywhere?
And it's almost like paying homage to the yellow posts we see in American football. And
Mm.
I love that they sort of tried to Americanize every little element that they can. And everything you said there, the field markings, even the investment in the production in terms of the camera work, like seeing that, I think they call it the spider camera that follows
Yeah, yeah,
behind the play of the ball. Just mesmerizing when you see him kick off the ball and you have that shot that sort of follows the ball down. And it just it's an insight into the potential of what the game could become down the track.
yes,
And
certainly is.
yeah, and I don't know, mate. I think like obviously being able to play that match on a field that had dry conditions, it was indoors. it just, I don't know, got me excited for summer rugby, mate. Just seeing a dry pitch and the attacking style of rugby we saw.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah,
And
I'm
that's very
excited.
true. We've had such a terrible amount of rain so far this winter. I mean, we're in early March now, and we've had 2 months of absolute rain in England. It's been pretty dreadful. And, we've had teams playing on soft pitches, muddy pitches, and so on. It's been absolutely um, ridiculous, to be honest. And, I'm a great believer. I think I've written elsewhere, I think in a Rugby League World article this month, that the Vegas weekend is the big kickoff for the NRL. It should also be the big kickoff for Super League. It should be the kickoff. We should have aligned seasons, and it should be the Vegas weekend should be the kickoff for both competitions. And with the World Club Challenge set in stone 2 weeks before it. So if the World Club Challenge was 2 weeks before it, so you could guarantee clubs taking part, whoever won the competition the previous year. And then 2 weeks after that, we've got the Vegas weekend, which kicks off the season for both competitions. I would like to see us sending 4 Super League clubs because, the only negative for me this year was that our game kicked off at midnight. Last year, the Wigan-Warrington game kicked off at 9:30 p.m. Saturday night our time because we had the women's game that was the game that kicked off at midnight. So there's room for 2 Super League games, in my view. But having said that, Jake, we do need to renegotiate the terms on which the British teams take part because we took probably more than 10,000 spectators there to the event. It would have been much less of an event without the British fans there, and I think we need to get the financial terms of the deal, renegotiated with the NRL to ensure that it's really worthwhile for the British teams going there.
Mm. No, I agree, mate. I feel like the English game deserves a bigger piece of that pie because the English fans bring the atmosphere. There's no denying it. You can hear it through the TV speakers, and I guess the Super League game was a much louder atmosphere for me than the NRL. And there was people still filtering into the stadium throughout that Super League match. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I think Volandis should be doing everything he can to keep the Super League clubs invested in the concept. Um, and I don't know, a lot of people are saying that we should look at including the World Club Challenge in Vegas, whether that gives fans enough time to prepare a trip over. That's the other question.
Well, the
But
difficulty is if you do that, which is certainly an interesting thought. Um, what if one of the teams that was going to take part, or that had already been scheduled as one of the 4 to go there, also won the competition that year? How would you therefore take that into account? Would you put another team in at the last minute? There are one or two, you know, one or two problems associated with doing that. So, I'm not saying they're not they can't be overcome, but they'd need to be very carefully thought about. But it's about time we did start thinking like this. That's the point. The World Club Challenge has to be a permanent feature on the annual calendar, and I think it's probably got to be played in England. If I'm really honest about it, I think there's more. There's always a bigger chance of getting a bigger turnout of fans in England than in Australia, as we've seen in recent years. So let's go ahead and do it. And the Australian team that plays in the World Club Challenge, if it's then on its way to Vegas 2 weeks later, then it wouldn't be a problem, would it?
yeah, and yeah, it's really hard to plan for. Obviously, I would have loved to have seen the type of crowd the Broncos could have pulled at Suncorp Stadium had the World Club Challenge been in Australia.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm biased in thinking we'd pull a better crowd than some of the Sydney clubs would,
I think
but
you would. Yeah. Well, you did
yeah,
do when you hosted it back in 1994. I think the crowd then was about 59,000. So, and that was the thing that actually, I think, caused Rupert Murdoch to think of Super League. Actually, if I remember the history correctly, it was the first. It was the spark that ignited the Super League fire. That particular game.
Yeah.
So the one thing that slightly disappointed me about Vegas this year, Jake, was not that anything to do with the event itself, but I was just disappointed that the crowd didn't grow more significantly from last year. It was 500 more than last year. Well, I don't know. I'd love to know how many Americans were in the crowd. Obviously not a massive number. For some reason, the NRL hasn't been able to get many local Las Vegas residents along to the game. Nothing like as many as we might have hoped that they would do. That I would have hoped they were going to draw more than 50,000 this year, maybe even as many as 60,000 into the stadium. And it's disappointing to see that there were still quite a lot of empty seats. I think it holds about 66,000, if I'm correct. I'd love to see a situation where all those seats were full.
Yeah, it is disappointing, mate. And I don't know, if you're a fan of American sports and American culture, you kind of learn that Americans don't really care about anything other than their sport, or American sports fans don't really care about anything other than their own sports. Like you look at
Yeah.
the Super Bowl winners, the NBA winners, they call themselves the world champions, which is very controversial outside of America, but
Mm.
they seem to think that they're the best in the world, and so they can label themselves with that title. But yeah, I don't know. I think the marketing of Vegas, they need to rethink it if they are going to try and attract a younger generation or a younger demographic from America. And I saw who was it? Someone was on radio this week suggesting that we should get some of these streamers, some of these guys who, document their lives and have a massive following of young viewers, and try and just throw the checkbook at them to get them to a game and let them live stream the game on the sidelines perhaps, and try and film their reactions. And I guess the audience that they bring would be enough to expose us to the game, expose them to the game. But
Well, yeah, they just need to get American to circulate, maybe on TikTok, YouTube, or wherever, little videos of Americans who have experienced the game, who know a bit about it, who love it. There's one great video, very short video, that I posted on our forum, of a guy who's a fireman from Tennessee, who's become an incredible rugby league fan, and was at Las Vegas, and is interviewed by another guy, and he speaks ecstatically about rugby league. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, but the NRL need to pick up on that and make that sort of video viral. And the fact is that they're not doing it. That the NRL, we think the NRL is good at marketing. It's not really. Because if it were, they would pick up on videos like that, and as I say, they'd make them viral. They'd circulate them through all of their client base, and get we want to see Americans saying great things about rugby league, and we want to see it in readiness for next year. Start planning next year's Las Vegas now,
yeah,
and make sure that Americans just are, because one of the great things about Americans, Jake, which I put on our forum, is that they do have this incredible ability, just ordinary Americans really, this when they get enthusiastic about something, they can speak really positively about it, and really promote the idea particularly well. And this guy, as I say, is a fireman from Tennessee. Great guy, obviously looks a terrific guy. And he also says, by the way, I mean, he knows quite a bit about British Rugby League. He actually says he's a Ghoul Vikings fan.
what are the odds of that?
So, obviously, in this in our podcast, maybe we can put a link to that guy and let people see it generally and start trying to make it go a bit more viral than it has done, because it's only been viewed about 1,000 times as we speak,
Mm.
and it deserves a lot more coverage than that. Or at least the YouTube version has only been seen 1,000 times. It needs to go out an awful lot more than that, mate.
Yeah, we'll see if we can track it down. The other thing that worries me about Vegas, Martin, is for the casual American fans that are watching it, what are the odds that they just look at our sport and go, oh, that's rugby, but they get interested in it and then they start maybe participating in rugby union or start searching up rugby union
That's
highlights.
the danger.
That's my fear.
That's a danger, and that's because we've not got a sufficiently strong identity. And we've just got to keep working on that and make sure that ultimately people do know the difference between the two sports. It's not easy though, and I get sick of people who don't know the difference between rugby union and rugby league. But nonetheless, there are people uh, like that, and there will be a lot in the United States who fall into that category. In fact, one of the things, by the way, that intrigued me this week in Australia, were if you read the Sydney Morning Herald, which I tend to do most days, it's interesting that a couple of articles have appeared on the sports pages there. One by their rugby union writer saying that rugby league will never be a success globally. The people love rugby union far too much. Rugby union's already established in the United States, and it's a much better game to watch than rugby league is, and so on and so forth. Which struck me as an odd time to have an article saying that. And there's another article in there this week, written by one of their senior sports writers, praising to high heaven the AFL, saying it's going to take over Western Sydney if we're not careful. They're out there converting lots and lots of kids to want to play Aussie rules rather than rugby league, and it just seems an odd time for those sorts of articles to appear. So it's more or less saying, rugby league can go and try and unsuccessfully to colonise Las Vegas, but we're going to come and colonise the rugby league heartland. And I'm just not sure why the Sydney Morning Herald has chosen to run those two articles almost concurrently at the current time, right at the start of the rugby league season. I don't want to peddle a conspiracy theory, but it just seems odd to me that there should be that coincidence of those two articles, one from a rugby union perspective and one from an AFL perspective, when it's been such a great weekend for rugby league in its Las Vegas adventure.
Come on, Martin, you know that there's no hidden agendas in journalism, mate, especially in the sports world. Uh,
Not at all. No, it's interesting, isn't
yeah,
it?
no,
Yeah.
very timely, mate, very timely. And it comes at a time when all the talk in Australian sports media is about rugby league going to Vegas. What's happened 3 years in a row now. And I know in Queensland this could be a Queenslander perspective, but no other sport gets a mention when Vegas is underway.
No.
But
Who
yeah,
would
I
you
don't
like
know.
to see going there next year, by the way? Who do you think the Dolphins would be keen on going?
Um, I
I mean,
think you've got to probably
two
take.
Queensland clubs have been so far, haven't they? Brisbane went and first year, and now North Queensland. Do you think the Dolphins would take a few?
Yeah, I mean, they would take a few. I'm trying to weigh up in my head who would take more between them and the Titans. I'd probably have to say the Dolphins at the moment. I'd like to see Melbourne Storm over there and Parramatta. I'd love to see Para over there. I don't think they've been yet.
Hmm.
The
West
Tigers
Tigers?
also haven't been.
No,
So I'm not sure, mate. That's the thing, because
because 12 clubs have been
I,
there.
yeah, selfishly, I'm thinking like you should take the teams that have the strongest fan bases and the fans that will follow them over there. But the other half of me is saying, well, we don't really want to have to rely on fans traveling over there because we want to attract those American fans. So yeah, I'm not sure, mate. I think if they're going to go share it around, you'd have to think it'll be the Dolphins, the Storm, and then maybe Parramatta and Tigers.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
and then
That'd take
maybe
it to
the Titans.
16. Yeah, the Titans would then
Mm,
be the only club that hadn't gone.
yeah, and I mean, I think they probably need to consult with those clubs to see if they actually want to go. I believe Melbourne might have been, um, yeah, potentially going in year two, but they declined to go over, I
Mm.
think, and I think the West Tigers might have also declined. So.
Well, they didn't. They did under Shane Richardson, who poo-pooed the whole idea, but he's no longer the chief exec. And I think
Mm.
the new guy has said that they would like to go. I think they've had a change of heart on that one.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was going to ask you, mate, like the length of 3 games, do you think that's a good amount? Because we had 4 last year. Have we hit the sweet spot with 3 games?
Three game, yeah, probably. I think to sit through 4 games is a lot, isn't it? And it depends if on whether you can come and go and so on. But I think as the Bulldogs Dragons game went on after half time, quite a few of the English fans started leaving, didn't they? Pres- Presumably to get back to their hotels. So 3 games might be the right number, I would think. Probably more so than 4.
Mm. And then I think that's the other issue with Vegas is how expensive the drinks are at the stadium,
Oh
and
gosh, yeah.
also the fact that once you enter, if you leave, you can't get back in.
No,
So it's not as if you want to duck out for perhaps an hour or so to have a few
yeah.
drinks at a much more affordable bar. They can't do that. So maybe, yeah, maybe if they do look at moving it to Miami one year, I know that Volandis has big plans to go global. I think the drinks would be a lot cheaper over in Miami.
Very probably. Not much cheaper in London, though. Having said that, if he wants to come to London, London's a expensive joint, I'll tell you that. But who
What's a
knows?
pint at Wembley go for these days? Would
Oh,
we know?
crikey, I've no idea, mate. It's a long time since I mean, I go to Wembley every year, but I don't normally buy a beer there. So I stick to soft drinks, mate, or coffee. So I'm not, I'm the least expert in the world when it comes to the cost of beer.
There's no drinking on the job for League Express,
Oh,
hey
no,
mate?
no, not for me.
Yeah. All right, mate. Well, that's pretty much a Vegas wrap. Anything else you'd like to touch on about the event itself before we move on?
No, well, just one thing. A nice quote from a guy called Leonard Blavatnik, who is the owner of DAZN, the Ukrainian um, guy who owns the DAZN broadcasting and streaming organization, which owns Foxtel in Australia. And his quote, it was his first ever rugby league game, live rugby league game. He was there at the stadium. And his quote is, "It's my first time at a rugby league game. It's fantastic. We'd like to do more." That's his quote. And that's pretty significant, I would say. If I mean, he's worth something like $200 billion, people say. Goodness knows how much he's worth, really. 'Cause I wouldn't, he's in the stratosphere, put it that way. Based in London, and as I say, he's the guy who set up DAZN, and he's implying there that he'd like to do more rugby league, and that's an interesting one. Bearing in mind that we've got our negotiation currently underway to get a new broadcasting contract in this country, and the other thing that's worth pointing out is that Nigel Wood was over there, the chairman of the RFL, and he met Peter Vlandis and Andrew Abdo, and they had some pretty positive discussions, but about the future relationship between the two governing bodies. Talked about financial, linkages between the two competitions, and Vlandis and Abdo are very open to that, as we obviously know. But it's still some way down the track, Jake. It's not something that's going to happen in the very near future, but we may well see some investment from Australia or from the NRL into the British game. But the precise form that will take is yet to be determined.
Yeah, and it seems like he wants to get rid of the clubs having such a big say in what happens with the future of the game as well. It seems to be a bit of a sticking point for him.
Well, they will have less actually. The reorganisation at the RFL, it is there will be rubber stamped on March the 24th at the Rugby League Council meeting later this month. But it will be a totally independent board. There's no question about that, and we'll see what happens. But so the clubs will have proportionately less say, but not. I mean, to say that the clubs in the NRL don't have any say is obviously ridiculous, because of course they do. And I think we'll probably have a very equivalent situation over here when the new board of directors is rubber stamped on the 24th of March. So I think I don't think that will be a problem. Put it that way.
Yep. Now, mate, let's take a look at some of the championship news. Obviously, Halifax Panthers will return to the field on Sunday with a new club formed. What can you tell me about the latest out of Halifax?
Well, they're going to have a 12-point deduction, and that's largely because they've gone into liquidation, and some of the people who were connected with the old club are still connected with the new one, and they're still using some of the assets of the old club. So it is being penalised with a 12 points deduction. Hopefully that's just in accordance with the RFL bylaws, I suppose. But hopefully that won't damage the support that they'll get on their return. It's a shame in a way that they're playing London Broncos on Sunday on their return, because, get ready for a cricket score, you might well say. London Broncos have been beating everybody by a ridiculous margin. They scored more than 100 points against North Wales at the weekend, and they'll continue to score highly against other teams until they're in Super League next year. So, but it's great to see Halifax back, and everybody wants to see them back. We're back up to 20 teams in the championship, and I hope that this time they'll keep their spending under much greater control, and they'll manage to put together a squad of players who will perform reasonably well for them, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how it all works out. But I'm just really glad to see them back, Jake. And Halifax is just such a rugby league town, really. I'm very near to it. We're in Brighouse, of course, which is part of Calderdale, very close to the town of Halifax, and we'll be very glad to see them up and running again.
For sure, mate. It was quite worrying seeing some of the financial pressures that the championship clubs were facing, and it's good it would be great to see them back out in the park this weekend. So
no doubt about it. Yeah.
Now, mate, the other big talking point, I know the season's only young, but the amount of injuries we've seen across the league. Obviously, a couple of weeks back, Will Price out for the season with an ACL injury. You mentioned Blake Taaffe as well. It seems to be a lot of the fullbacks that are going down at the moment.
Well, yeah. If you go down the list of fullbacks, club by club in Super League who are injured, you've got Castleford, as you say, Blake Taaffe, Huddersfield, Niall Evans is out. Hull, you've got Will Price out. Hull KR, you've got Arthur Morg out. Lee, you've got David Armstrong, he's out, although he's been out long term, really. St Helens, you've got Jack Welsby missing, and Wigan, Jai Field is now he's going to be out for a while with appendicitis. At least that's at least that's not a knee injury, thank goodness.
You can't really help that one, can you?
I don't want to wish any ill will on Jai Field, but I'm very glad it's appendicitis rather than a knee injury, because at least he'll be able to come back reasonably quickly, hopefully, from that. It's a bit unusual for a player to be out of action because of that particular condition. But good luck to Jay. I hope he's back soon. And as I say, I'm just glad that it's that and not a much more serious knee injury that so many other players seem to be getting.
But yeah, mate, it's devastating. Obviously, we saw Sivo go through it last year, and I was when that happened, I was starting to think to myself, "Oh, what's he going to do?" It's best for him just to go home, which I believe he did. But now we're seeing him come full circle, return to the park. He's shown that he can come back and be a beast. I'm hoping for the same return for all of these players, mate. But yeah, it's very disappointing. It doesn't matter who you go for to see this talent taken out for the season. Very
It's
disappointing. But
dreadful.
I guess the only positive to come out of it is I guess it gives youngsters the opportunity to put forward their case. We
Oh
could see
yes,
some
yeah, yeah,
young guns unearthed. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I forgot to mention that the other fullback who's missing is Bailey Hodgson. He's got an injury. Fortunately, not too long term at Lee. So it is a catalogue of. Is there something special about playing at full back that makes you susceptible to injury? I wouldn't have thought so, but who knows? It's very difficult to rationalise it, I think.
yeah, and I think for the poor old Saints at the moment, like they've also lost Johnny Lomax, and I think Alex Walmsley is also out with injury at the moment.
Foot
So
injury, yeah, he's out now for about 6 weeks probably. So, but again, they've got a young lad called Noah Stevens who will hopefully come into the squad and show what he's capable of. He's only 22, I think, at the moment. So, in the long term, I mean, obviously Alex is a great player, but Saints are going to have to replace him at some time in the not very distant future. So it's good for them to be able to try out players like Stevens, and obviously they've got George Delaney, who's their other young prop forward, and those two may be the future of the front row at St Helens. Matty Lees is still out, of course. He's the club captain. He's going to be out for about 10 weeks with a knee injury. So they're doing it tough, but they had a terrific win at Catalans at the weekend, 36-4, with Kyle Felt scoring a try in the 78th and 79th minute, two very late tries to extend that scoreline. So, but yeah, they can be quite pleased. They've got 4 points from 3 games, Saints, with all those injuries. So
oh yeah,
that's quite encouraging.
yeah, and just some other results we may want to touch on from the weekend. Obviously, we had you might call it the promotion battle between Bradford and Toulouse. Bradford got the win there, 18-6, and then the York Knights, surprise
Winning
win,
at
another
Hull.
1 point win over a Hull side. How do they do it?
Well, they deserved it, mate. They played extremely well. They got the win in the end. It was a Danny Richardson field goal that won it for them on 61 minutes. Scored a late converted try by Lewis Martyn, but it was the Richardson goal that ultimately made the difference. The fascinating thing is that the three promoted clubs are all in the top half of the table after 3 rounds of fixtures. So that's got to be fantastic, hasn't it, really? Because everybody was saying, oh, obviously promoting 3 clubs is ridiculous. They'll never compete, or, they won't compete on a regular basis. And maybe they won't as the season goes on and they get more injuries and so on. Maybe their squads might not be good enough in the long term, but it's great to see them starting the season in that sort of way. And as I say, who would have thought after 3 weeks of the season you'd have a league table with those 3 teams in the top 7 and Hull KR at the bottom of the league? That situation will not continue. But it's an interesting one because this weekend Hull KR go to Huddersfield, and both those teams are the only 2 teams still on 0. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, for sure, mate. The Hull FC, Wakefield, they're still, outside the top 8.
Oh yeah.
Got Cass in eighth place there, Catlin's in 11, Lee in 12. So, I mean, I know it is quite premature of us to be looking at the table, but
Yeah.
still great to see those new sides doing well.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But yeah, mate, the other big news that's been happening on this side of the world over the last few weeks now, the Zac Lomax drama between Parramatta and Melbourne Storm. Um,
It's
looking
now
like,
been
mate,
resolved, but can you explain how it's been resolved, Jake? I just want to be absolutely sure that I understand the situation properly.
so there's a lot to it, but it sounds like he was granted the release from Parramatta on the grounds that he's not to play for any other NRL club without seeking Parramatta's permission. That way, that if he was to go play for a rival, Parramatta could ask for some sort of compensation or a player swap or thereabouts. And um, seems like Melbourne Storm might have been doing some prying behind the scenes, trying to convince him to come over after the R360 competition fell through, because there was a lot of reports that that's why Zach asked for that release. He got taken to court, and basically the resolution is that he can't go and sign with the Melbourne Storm unless Parramatta can come to some sort of agreement with Melbourne. They weren't able to come to that agreement.
No.
But Zach is still free to play in the NRL for another team if that team can propose an offer that Parramatta would accept. But to my knowledge, no clubs have come forward with a good enough package. So it looks like
No,
Zach
because
will
they
have to
want one
sit.
of Parramatta will want one of their top player, whichever club it is, they will want a top player, a player who ranks at the same level as Zac Lomax, rather than money, to be honest. I think they want players more than money.
Yeah,
So
and
it seems unlikely to me. Now, Zac Lomax, his original deal with Parramatta was a 4-year deal from 2025 to 2028. So what they were saying in effect was that he could only return to the NRL without their permission in 2029. That's now gone to 2028, so he's got a year off that. So in 2028, Zac Lomax could sign for any NRL player without needing to consult Parramatta, any NRL club rather, without needing to consult Parramatta. But before that, if he wants to play this season or next season, he can only do so with their permission. But there's another factor, Jake. That restriction doesn't apply to him playing in Super League, for example. So if a Super League club wanted to sign him for the rest of this season and for next season, then it would be, as I understand it at least, perfectly able to make a move and to sign him. So he could play in the European competition, um, and I mean, not many people have suggested that he's keen on doing that, but you never know. And of course, the other alternative is him playing rugby union for one of the Super Rugby clubs, or even a club in France or Japan or somewhere, which would be an awful waste of his talent, in my opinion. But that option, if those are the only options he's left with, then that's presumably what he would go and do, I imagine.
the big loser in all of this, mate, is the Melbourne Storm, because they've been ordered to pay for Parramatta's legal expenses, which are about 250,000 Australian dollars. I've got up here. It looks like potentially they were close to coming to an agreement. I think Melbourne were going to take on Ryan Madison and his contract. He's out at the moment. I think he's maybe dealing with some concussion, head related issues, and I'm not sure his status beyond this year is known. But I think the move would have seen Melbourne Storm take on his contract for 2026 and potentially 2027. But I don't think Parramatta consulted Ryan Madison about it, and he basically said, um, no. So he
No.
basically said that he would play. He wasn't going to move down there for just a single season. He needed a guarantee for 2 seasons, is my understanding, and Melbourne
Yes,
weren't
and it
willing
fell
to do
through on
that.
that basis. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, look, it's if you're in Melbourne's corner and you've just paid $250,000 in legal fees, a part of you would be saying, well, we've come this far, we need to come to an agreement, otherwise this is all for nothing. Um, the money that they were going to give as part of that deal, I think they were also going to send Parramatta 750,000 Australian dollars, but that can't be used within the salary cap. So, I mean, if you could include that money in the salary cap, hell yeah, it would be worth it. But, I mean, they could invest it in their juniors perhaps or some new club facilities. But unless that money's going into the salary cap, it's not very beneficial.
No, no, no. Of
So,
course not. No, no. So as I say, the Eels prefer players to money at the moment. They're more in need of top players than they are of big money. So it looks as though the deal's dead and buried, doesn't it? Really, as far as we can
yeah.
gather.
No, that's it, mate. And, who knows? We might see him over in the Super League. That'd be a great pickup for a club over there if anyone has
I'd
the
love to see him
cash.
because he's a really talented guy, and I think. I mean, I don't know what. Obviously, I don't know what advice he took when he decided to seek a release from Parramatta, but obviously he thought that this Rugby 360 operation was going to come in later this year, which it isn't doing, and it was. I mean, somebody gave him some bad advice, unfortunately. I don't know
Mm.
who, or maybe they gave him good advice, but he just didn't take it. He just took the wrong advice. Who knows? But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think he's too good a player to be out of the game for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, I must say, it's as a league fan that sees players breaking their contracts all the time, it was kind of nice to see Parramatta draw a line in the sand and say, no, you signed your contract, you will abide by it.
It means
Otherwise,
something.
we'll
Yeah,
see in court.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
just don't. If you sign something, then you either stick by it or you negotiate a release that makes sense for both parties. And but you are, when you sign a 4-year contract, it's a 4-year contract, and you're on. He was on terrific money at Parramatta, so it's unfortunate, but but he's got to comply with those terms. But I do hope he's back in the game soon, having said that, because I think he's such a good player.
Mm. And I must say, I think Para fans will be rejoicing. They've gotten one back over Melbourne now. I know that they're all very salty that the Melbourne Storm beat them in a grand final with a team that was over the salary cap. They had their title stripped from them. So I know Parramatta fans have always had Melbourne Storm as a bit of a natural rival. But mate,
And they play
I'm
each other
expecting.
this week, don't they? Thursday night in Melbourne.
That's right.
I think the be interested to see the reception of the Melbourne fans for Parramatta.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be.
No, it's a game to watch.
Oh yeah, there will be fireworks, mate. So I'm looking forward to sitting down on Thursday night and watching that one. Um,
Absolutely.
all right, mate. Well, should we take a look at this weekend's matchups and get your quick picks, or is there any other news topics you want to touch on?
No, I don't think so. No, I think we've covered quite a bit of ground there, mate. So we'll see.
All these numbers we're talking about, I'm like, oh, this is why I chose journalism to get away from all the
Of
mathematics
course.
side of things, mate.
Yeah.
Better dealing with words, that's for sure.
Mm.
All right, mate. We start with Thursday night's matchup. We've got Wakefield taking on Hull FC. Who do you like in that one?
Well, I think you'd have to say Wakefield. I think Wakefield played quite well against Warrington despite losing. They scored some really nice, nice tries in the second half. Hull were disappointing against York, and they've lost Will Price at full back, who's a big loss for them. They need to improve. Both teams are on 2 points from 3 games. So, whoever loses this game will start falling behind the top six. So neither of them can really afford to lose, if we're honest about it. I think Wakefield could just edge out Hull by maybe about 10 points.
Yep. Then moving on to Friday night's matchups, we have York taking on Warrington.
Well, Warrington have started off with a bit of a bang. They've only played 2 league games because they had one postponed that should have been against Hull KR on the World Club Challenge weekend. I think Warrington will probably have a bit too much firepower for York, but interesting to see Paul Vaughan, the York prop forward, playing against his old club, and I think there's no doubt that he will be trying very hard to make sure that York really put up a stiff challenge. But I don't think they'll be quite strong enough to compete with Warrington. I think Warrington are undefeated on 2 games, and I think they'll be undefeated on 3. I think they'll win by about 6 points on Friday night.
And we've got the other matchup, Leeds taking on Catalans.
Well, Lee have got about 10 players out injured at the moment, according to Adrian Lamb's press conference this week. We've not seen the squad named yet, but I think they got absolutely hammered last weekend at Wigan. Again, partly because of injuries. They had a weak side to start with, and then got some injuries during the game. And Catalans, again, both these teams are in a similar situation. From 2 points from 3 games, Catalans probably need a win just as much as Lee do, but I think home advantage might just allow Lee to sneak it with a 2-point margin.
Yeah. Moving on to Saturday's matchups, we've got Toulouse taking on Wigan. That'll be a tough ask.
Oh, a tough ask for Toulouse, yes. I can't see them beating, even although Wigan will be going there without Jay Field, which is obviously to Toulouse's advantage. But I still can't quite see Toulouse beating Wigan. I mean, Toulouse have been outstanding so far, 2 wins from 3 games. They beat Castleford at home, but Wigan are a different proposition, obviously. And I think Wigan will win by about 16 points.
Yep. Moving on to, I know we've still got another Saturday matchup. Saints taking on Bradford.
Well, again, Bradford have made a terrific return to Super League. They'll take a lot of fans to St Helens, I think, for an early evening game on Saturday. But I think, and Saints have got loads of injuries, as we've already pointed out. But even so, I just think Saints might have a bit too much experience, and now so they've started reasonably well. They got that 2-point win at home against Lee, and I think they might win against Bradford by 12 points.
Yeah, nice. Moving on to Sunday's matchups, we've got Leeds taking on Cass.
Well, Castleford played quite well against Huddersfield, but Leeds played pretty well, didn't they, against Hull KR in Vegas? So I think Leeds probably winning by about 18 points with another super show from Micah Sevo, probably scoring 2 more tries. So 18 points with 2 tries from Sevo. How about that?
He'd have to be a pretty strong favourite to win the leading try scorer award at the end of the year.
No doubt about it. Yes, I think I'd put my money on him. If I were a betting man, of course, which I'm not. But if I were, I'd back Sevo.
For sure. In the final matchup of the round, mate, we have Huddersfield taking on Hull KR.
The 2 teams that have got no points from their opening games in 13th and 14th position. Huddersfield, as usual, having lots of injuries. Hull KR coming home from Vegas with their tails between their legs, I suppose you might say. I can't see Hull KR not winning this game. I think they'll bounce back, actually, very strongly. I think they'll be very highly motivated to bounce back, and I think they'll win by 20 points.
Yeah, it's if they thought going to Vegas and playing last weekend was tough, I think coming home and playing will be even tougher. But I mean, they won't be short of motivation. Hull KR, that's for sure.
And at least they're not playing till Sunday.
That's right. Bit more time to rest and recover, and plenty of time to watch the film back from last weekend. All right, mate. Well, we might end things here and do it again next week. No big events in terms of rugby league this weekend. Back to the usual scheduling, but I guess we've got some round 1 games taking place here.
The opening of the NRL competition. Which game are you most looking forward to in the NRL this week?
Mate, Broncos Panthers. You won't be surprised to hear I'm actually going to head down for that one. Yeah, so it's being played at Suncorp. So I'll be heading along to that one with one of my good mates, Hayden. But yeah, it's going to be tough for it to live up to the atmosphere that I experienced at the preliminary final last year against Penrith. But I'm expecting a loud atmosphere nonetheless.
And are you expecting Brisbane to win. That's the main thing.
Mate, I hope so. Because if we have a similar result that Hull KR had after their World Club Challenge win, mate, I'll be, yeah, I don't know, a state of depression for a few weeks, I think. Um,
Absolutely.
all right, Martin, we'll wrap things up here and meet back again next
Great.
week.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot, Jake.